Megalodon. If ancient oceans had a final boss, Megalodon is the closest thing to it. Not because it was just huge, but because it was built to make huge prey look helpless. This was the largest fish known from the fossil record, a shark so massive that even conservative estimates place it at around 15 to 18 meters long, while some later reconstructions suggest it may have been even larger. Its teeth alone could reach nearly 18 centimeters, thick, triangular blades with serrated edges made for slicing flesh instead of merely gripping it, and those teeth were not decoration. Fossil whale bones have been found scarred by Megalodon bites, with broken tooth tips still lodged in the bone, which means this thing was not cruising around nibbling fish. It was attacking animals that were already gigantic by our standards. What makes Megalodon even more unnerving is that the classic image of it as a scaled-up great white may be wrong. Some researchers now think it may have had a sleeker, more efficient body, less like a bulky shark and more like something engineered for long-range power. So imagine the silhouette first, a dark shape longer than a bus, moving through open water with almost no effort, carrying a mouth wide enough to engulf massive chunks of prey in one attack. You would not need to see the whole animal. One tooth, one shadow, one breached whale suddenly vanishing beneath the surface would be enough. And somehow, this is only the beginning. Mosasaurus, and then the ocean offers something worse in a completely different way. Megalodon still looks like a shark, which means part of your brain knows where to place it. Mosasaurus does not give you that comfort. This was not a fish and not a dinosaur, but a marine lizard, a reptilian ambush predator from the late Cretaceous with a long, muscular body, paddle-like limbs, and a skull that looked built for seizing anything unlucky enough to share its water. Its body was snake-like, its tail drove it through the sea, and its jaws were lined with conical, backward curving teeth that were perfect for grabbing slippery prey and making escape almost impossible. But the really eerie part is the jaw itself. Mosasaurs had joints in the jaw and flexible connections at the front that allowed the lower jaws to spread outward while feeding, helping them deal with larger prey in a way that feels disturbingly close to a nightmare version of a lizard crossed with the sea serpent. Fossil evidence shows they ate fish, turtles, and even other mosasaurs, which gives them that especially grim prehistoric edge. If it moved, and it fit, it was food. Some species grew enormous, with the biggest Mosasaurus individuals approaching the length of the largest known giant marine predators of their era. And unlike the open ocean grandeur of Megalodon, Mosasaurus feels meaner, more intimate, like something that could erupt upward from green coastal water in a burst of scales. Teeth and white turbulence. One predator dominated with size. This one did it with anatomy that seems almost unfair. Helicoprion. After giants like Megalodon and Mosasaurus, the next predator does something even stranger. It does not win by looking like a perfected killer. It wins by looking wrong. Helicoprion was an ancient shark relative from long before the age of marine reptiles, and for years, paleontologists could not even agree on where its most famous weapon was supposed to go. That weapon was a spiral tooth whorl, a living buzzsaw of serrated teeth coiled inside the lower jaw. Not on the snout, not sticking out like some cartoon blade, but packed into the mouth itself, where new teeth kept growing forward while the older ones curled back into the spiral. The result is one of the most unsettling feeding systems ever discovered in a vertebrate. Instead of a mouth that simply bit down, Helicoprion seems to have used that whorl to slice and draw prey inward, especially softer-bodied animals like squid or fish. And that is what makes it so eerie. It was not just another giant predator with a bigger bite. It was a predator built around a single impossible mechanism, as if evolution had briefly decided that normal jaws were too boring. In the darkness of the Permian Sea, it would have looked less like a shark attack and more like a trap closing, Dunkleosteus. Then you go even farther back, into a world before the ocean was ruled by sleek reptiles or giant sharks, and you meet something that looks almost unfinished in the most dangerous way possible. Dunkleosteus was one of the top predators of the Devonian seas, a heavily armored fish with a front half covered in bony plates and a rear body that vanished into the water behind it. It did not have teeth in the usual sense. Instead, its jaws formed sharpened bony blades, like two shears built into a living tank. Biomechanical studies suggest it could open its mouth with startling speed and then slam it shut with immense force, enough to slice through prey and even deal with armor. That alone would make it memorable. But Dunkleosteus has another layer of menace. The animal we picture in popular media may have been exaggerated for decades. Newer research suggests the famous giant may have been shorter than the old monster-sized reconstructions. But that does not make it less impressive. In some ways, it makes it worse. Because now it stops feeling like a fantasy Leviathan and starts feeling like something more believable. A compact, brutally efficient killer with a skull like a guillotine and the temperament of the first true boss fight in vertebrate history, before the age of elegant predators. There was this blunt instrument with a mouth that looked made for ending things quickly. Kronosaurus. By the time you reach Kronosaurus, the ocean has learned how to build a predator that feels almost militarized. This was a giant pliosaur, a short-necked marine reptile with a massive skull, a thick, powerful body, and 4 flippers that drove it through the water with terrifying control. If long-necked plesiosaurs look eerie and elegant, Kronosaurus looks like the answer to them. Its head was enormous, its jaws were lined with large conical teeth, and its skull alone could reach well over 2 meters, depending on the specimen. Older reconstructions sometimes made it absurdly huge, but even more cautious estimates still leave you with an animal around 9 to 11 meters long, which is more than enough when the front end is basically a snapping battering ram. Fossil evidence suggests pliosaurs like this targeted large prey, and Kronosaurus has been linked to attacks on other marine reptiles as well as hard-shelled animals such as turtles and ammonites. That mix is what gives it such a vicious identity. It was not specialized into one neat role. It was a heavy-jawed opportunist that could crush, seize, and tear through whatever the Cretaceous Sea offered up. Megalodon feels like a ruler. Mosasaurus feels like an ambush. Kronosaurus feels like impact. And from here, the ocean only gets more uncanny. Basilosaurus. Then the ancient ocean changes shape again. Basilosaurus is unsettling because at first glance it does not even look like a whale in the way we imagine whales. It was one of the earliest fully marine whales, but its body was long, narrow, and almost serpentine. More like an eel stretched to monstrous proportions than the broad, powerful form of a modern cetacean. At roughly 15 to 21 meters long, depending on the specimen, it was enormous for its time, with a skull up to around 1.5 meters and jaws armed not with the simplified peg-like teeth of modern whales, but with slicing, crushing teeth built for serious damage. Fossils and stomach content evidence suggest it fed on fish, sharks, and even other whales, including smaller relatives like Dorudon. And then comes the detail that makes Basilosaurus feel almost cursed. It still had tiny hind limbs, useless for walking, hanging off the back half of a giant seagoing predator like a leftover memory from when whale ancestors still had legs. It was a mammal wearing the silhouette of a sea serpent, and that contradiction makes it feel deeply wrong. By now, the ocean is no longer just full of predators. It is full of body plans that seem to come from different worlds. Thalassomedon. And then, instead of giving you another skull-first bruiser, prehistory gives you reach. Thalassomedon was a giant long-necked plesiosaur, one of those animals that seems almost too strange to function until you picture it moving through open water. Its body was large, its flippers broad, but the feature that mattered most was that absurd neck, stretching for roughly half its total length. In some reconstructions, the whole animal reached around 11 to 12 meters, with the neck so extended it feels less like anatomy and more like a hunting tool. The head at the end of it was relatively small, but lined with sharp teeth suited for seizing quick prey. Rather than smashing through the sea like Kronosaurus, Thalassomedon feels like something quieter and more unnerving. A patient stalker that could keep its body at a distance while the head drifted into a school of fish like the tip of a living spear. Some remains have also been found with stomach stones, or gastroliths, which may have helped with buoyancy or digestion, adding one more odd detail to an already bizarre design. After all the giants built around jaws, Thalassomedon reminds you that sometimes the most alien predator is the one that barely seems armed at all until it is suddenly close enough to bite. Liopleurodon. Then the elegance vanishes. Liopleurodon brings the ocean back to brute force, but in a more compact, predatory form than the oversized legends people often remember. This was a pliosaur from Jurassic Europe, a short-necked marine reptile with a massive head, a thick body, and 4 powerful flippers that turned it into a fast, controlled hunter. What makes Liopleurodon interesting is that its exact size has been argued over for years, because fragmentary and uneven fossils have blurred the picture. But even without the exaggerated versions, the animal that remains is still bad enough. A broad-skulled ambush predator with conical teeth for gripping struggling prey and a body built for violent acceleration. It would not have needed the theatrical outline of Thalassomedon or the serpent-length weirdness of Basilosaurus. It had the opposite advantage. It was concentrated, dense, purposeful. The kind of predator that feels less like a drifting nightmare and more like a torpedo with a mouth. In an ocean full of long-necked shapes and giant silhouettes, Liopleurodon is what happens when evolution strips away the extra drama and leaves only the machinery of pursuit. Livyatan. And for the final descent, the ocean gives you something almost unfair. A whale that hunted like a macro-predator. Livyatan was roughly in the size range of a modern sperm whale. But that comparison hides how different it really was. Modern sperm whales dive deep for squid and do not have functional teeth in the upper jaw. Livyatan did. Its skull was about 3 meters long. Its upper and lower jaws were packed with massive teeth, and some of those teeth exceeded 36 centimeters. They were deeply set, built to interlock and shear, turning the bite into something closer to a meat-carving trap than the grab-and-swallow feeding style of living sperm whales. Researchers have suggested it likely targeted medium-sized baleen whales and hunted more like a giant killer whale than the deep-diving sperm whales of today. That alone would make it unforgettable. But Livyatan becomes truly cinematic when you realize when and where it lived, in Miocene seas where giant sharks like Megalodon also existed. Whether they directly competed is still uncertain, but they were part of the same brutal world. Two different answers to the same question of how to kill something enormous in open water. Ending on Livyatan feels right because it does not just look dangerous. It feels like the ancient ocean finally learned how to turn a whale itself into the apex predator. By the time you reach the end of this descent, the ancient sea no longer feels like one place. It feels like a succession of nightmares, each era inventing a new way to rule the water. Some predators were built like blades, some like battering rams, some looked like serpents, lizards, or whales twisted into forms that should not have worked and somehow did. And that may be the most unsettling part of all. These were not monsters imagined by myth. The ocean really did make them.